Hey y'all, hope you're doing well today. So today I wanted to, I had to think about the presentation today for a little bit. Let me just go ahead and back up and say that because we're going to be talking about the shadow, okay, the shadow part of our psyche. And this is something I'm not super familiar with. And I debated on just waiting until I felt like I had a better grasp on this because on one hand, it's kind of like a lot of concepts. On one hand, it's kind of straightforward, but if you really want to dive deep and just gain all the layers of revelations from a study on a particular topic, it's like you could spend so much time on it. And the truth is, I feel like if you go that route and trying to get that deeper understanding, you're never going to reach a point where it's like the finale and you're done. So I thought I want to go ahead and share with you all my thought process because as you are also researching and learning and growing, hopefully it will benefit you too. So that's my inspiration for the message today. So it's just, I feel like it's amazing to learn about the mechanics of the human psyche. I mean, it's incredible. And I love how throughout the ages, people have been able to use the tendency of the human psyche to project, projection, and people have used that tendency for the benefit of humanity. And we're going to talk about that, right? So how is that possible? Essentially, when you personify different aspects of one person's psyche for the purposes of being able to perceive and analyze it, and research it and fully understand it, it's like, for some reason, anytime something is externalized, it's just, you're able to observe it then. It's almost like you can't see it when it's within yourself. You can only see it when it's out here. So it puts you in the position to observe, to be the observer. And like I said, there's the mechanics of projection, which a lot of times is unconscious that people do when they project their shadow aspects of themselves onto others so that they can judge and condemn and criticize and all that, right? The truth is other people can see those exact aspects within that person who's doing the projecting. So that's just so incredibly interesting to me. But yes, personification of human qualities and different aspects of our psyches. I've mentioned it before, but I just want to remind you, and I want to encourage you to look for that, to look for personification of these internal aspects when you're reading a story or watching a movie and you're seeing the characters, right? A lot of people are aware of symbols, and they can certainly mean all different kinds of things, including aspects of our actual physical reality. That's true, but also sometimes symbols are representative of aspects of ourselves. They have a psychological meaning, so I just encourage you to look for that. So today's presentation is going to be just a little sampling, just a little taste of the shadow aspect of the human psyche, okay? And this is important because when you consider the hero's journey, it's that whole descent into the darkness, into the unknown, that's generally regarded as scary and unfamiliar. That's really symbolic to me, from my lens, from my perception of getting acquainted with the shadow part of yourself. And so if you remember in the Garden of Eden, eating the forbidden fruit meant that it empowered them with the ability to judge, right? It was the knowledge of good and evil, but it's not judge as in discernment, because that's good. And that's where a lot of times, if I want to get clear on a message I'm getting from a particular Bible verse, I'll go and check it, similar verses throughout the Bible to see, because sometimes a word can have a double meaning. So the knowledge of good and evil here, it's like thinking that we can judge but not discernment, more like condemnation, more like we have the authority to judge another person, right? Or even ourselves. So, humility prevents this, right? Humility prevents this. And so here's where we get into narcissism, right? And people who are unwilling to face their own shadow aspects. They're unwilling to admit their faults, to apologize, to basically expose their true self behind the mask. Okay, they're certainly the opposite of being humble. And so, in fact, the fuel for their judgment, talking about condemning others, their fuel for that is their own shadow material that's held within themselves, right? And so, and their constant need for validation is for constructing their mask, or their fig leaves, you may say, right? Because if you remember, Adam and Eve were scared when they were hiding from God, right? After they had given themselves the authority by eating the fruit, right? To think that they could actually judge, through the lens of, or with regards to the meaning of like condemnation, right? Not discernment, not like good judgment, like that meaning of the word judge. But they were scared to be found out, Adam and Eve. So they were hiding behind the fig leaves, right? So I want to read a little bit to you, just a tiny bit out of the book today, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, and we're going to talk about it. So I'm in the first section called Departure, and if you have the book, it's on page 77, The Crossing of the First Threshold, and that's the section we're in, and we're actually going to read just a tiny portion here, just one sentence from page 79 at the top. The regions of the unknown, and then it has in parentheses, desert, jungle, deep sea, alien land, etc., are free fields for the projection of unconscious content. So, yes, it's certainly fuel for creative material, like comics and fairy tales and folklore, movies and all this stuff, right? Like fantasy type stuff. Fantastical stories. And so, yes, regions of the unknown are free fields for the projection of unconscious content. And so that's interesting, because it's kind of like when something is created like a storyline, a lot of times we think that, or the person who's doing the creating of the storyline thinks that it's original. But remember, the Bible says there are no new things under the sun, and all things that will be have already been. So it's kind of like reminiscent of what they call the collective unconscious. And so, but even within one person's own psyche, the part that's called the shadow self, there's a lot there that is we're not aware of. And so it works the same in that regard, that type of stuff can be projected out. And that's a lot of times what causes condemnation in this world, right? Pointing fingers at others, right? Instead of looking in the mirror. And so, yes, page 81, kind of middle way down, it says, now this, let me give you a little bit backdrop here. So this is a section about Pan, okay? It says the Arcadian god Pan is the best known classical example of this dangerous presence dwelling just beyond the protected zone of the village boundary. Now just please view this, what I'm going to read to you, through the lens of representing mechanics within a person's psyche. Okay, so you have a protected zone. In other words, it's like in the unconscious part, and it's considered a dangerous, right, presence, or a dangerous place of dwelling. All right, so it says the emotion that he, meaning Pan, instilled in human beings who by accident adventured into his domain was panic, fear, a sudden groundless fright, almost like when you hear people talk about being triggered. This is kind of what I'm pulling here, okay? Any trifling cause, then, the breaking of a twig, the flutter of a leaf, would flood the mind with imagined danger, and in the frantic effort to escape from his own aroused unconscious, the victim expired in a flight of dread. Yet Pan was benign to those who paid him worship, yielding the boons of the divine hygiene of nature. So this is so interesting to me. Again, I know that, or at least I've heard of a lot of people referencing this story and this character as literal, and through the lens of literal worship. I'm just asking you to view this all symbolically, okay? Which I feel like is Campbell's intention here anyway. And so if you think about what this is saying, I find it so accurate, such an accurate description of how this works, because remember, someone who doesn't have humility in their heart, someone who is wearing fig leaves or wearing a mask, and just totally unwilling to see their own faults, they're going to be terrified, right, of being found out, just like Adam and Eve. So it says, yeah, the emotion that he instilled in human beings who by accident adventured into his domain was panic, right? That's exactly describing how a narcissistic type person responds when they feel like they're about to be found out. And so, but I find it interesting that it says that he was benign to those who paid him worship, yielding the boons of the divine hygiene of nature. Meaning, this is my lens. I feel like this means that I've got my notes here. I'm not even reading them. I feel like this translates to, when it says those who paid him worship, I feel like those of us who are willing to give attention to, doesn't have to necessarily be worship, but just those of us who pay heed to or acknowledge our imperfections and our faults, or through the religious lens, our sins, right? We're acknowledging that. Then this whole shadow part is benign. There's no need to hide. There's no need to wear a mask or fig leaves. It's kind of like, this is me. You see what I'm saying? It's me. And I'm imperfect. I'm an imperfect human being, but I try. And so that's the difference. And I like how it says the boon yielded is the divine hygiene of nature, which I feel like, think about what that means. There's layers to what that could mean as well, right? Staying healthy. Hygiene is related to being healthy. And so someone who is just embracing their imperfections and yet trying to be better, in other words, they're not hiding them, that's healthy, right? And so, yes, so Pan, and by the way, Pan, I looked up the etymology of that, and I kind of have a funny story about that. When I first pulled it up, I looked it up on the online etymology dictionary, and the way it was describing like a literal pan, like what you would cook with, it was so, fanciful with the description that it was like, ooh, what does this mean? And then I realized they're talking about it like a frying pan. So it took me a minute. I'm still drinking my coffee. But the other meaning of pan, and I think this might be in regards to it being like a prefix, is all, right? Pan meaning all. So I view that as all aspects of oneself, including the imperfections, including the faults, right? So, yeah, for those who are trying to run from that, it is scary, right? It's terrifying. And essentially, they spend their whole lives tiptoeing and on edge and imprisoned, really, by as many, and this is my notes. So they spend their whole lives tiptoeing or on edge and imprisoned by as many constructs of righteousness they can manage. Meaning, let me just look like I am well polished in my manners, and let me just look like I am giving. They want recognition for is it called altruism? It's where you just have a giving nature. It's like they want that recognition, that public recognition. So they're just it's just part of that mask, right? And I don't know, it came to me to use the phrase constructs of righteousness, right? When really it's just a sham, it's just a mask. So yes, so Pan, in this sense, through this lens of symbolism, meaning all, is like the personification of the shadow self that is met or faced and accepted when the hero descends into the unknown, the unconscious, right? So, and remember that, when it says hygiene of nature, that's destruction and creation, right? In other words, you can't change something that you can't accept. You have to accept it first. So it's like you have to be willing to see your faults before you can work on them and become a better person. So that's part of hygiene too, part of that life, death, life cycle of nature. And so projection, this is all related to projection, right? The shadow self is projected externally, and it's projected externally because that's really far from oneself when it's just thrown way out there in the external world. It's why do they do this? To create as much distance as they can from themselves. Like, I would never be like that. That's just so ridiculous and laughable and just inferior and all this stuff, all these judging kind of qualities, right? They create distance between their false self, their mask, and their shadow material, their faults that they put out there. Okay, and so to live authentically, we have to embrace the all. We have to accept the full collective of your human nature, all aspects. Again, you're never going to be able to learn and grow without first acknowledging your faults, right? And we know this. Sometimes I just feel like finding material like this and just viewing, some things that we already know just through a different lens just kind of solidifies it for us. It validates it, and it just kind of further affirms the experiences that we went through, basically dealing with a mask and not even a real person. And that's why it's shocking, when you do see beyond the mask finally, because there's a slip up or whatever it is, right? Here was a really interesting revelation that I had. If somebody can't accept their full self, like a narcissist, right, who's always running from their faults, they're never going to get better because they're not going to accept those faults. What are they doing? Why are they doing this? Think about it. Okay, they like to project this image of being very strong, but the truth is they're essentially giving authority to and crowning all these different people out there, crowning them with the authority to judge them. Okay, so that in itself is like a projection. They're judging, right? They think they have the authority to judge because, again, it's the apple, right? It's the whole basis of sin right there in the Garden of Eden, when someone thinks they have the authority to judge. So because they think they have the authority to judge, they're projecting that onto other people, assuming that they have the authority also to judge them, so they have to wear the mask because they don't want to be judged. You see what I'm saying here? So it's like they're just giving the authority to themselves and to others. But I don't think this is conscious. So, you know, that's why they feel the need to wear a mask. So my question to you is this: who do you give the authority to judge you? Because that matters. That matters, right? Is the judgment of other people, you know, who are human and riddled with faults, right? It's the Bible says that none are without sin, right? Nobody's perfect as a human being. So I just encourage you to stay rooted in your truths, and I encourage you to continue to expand your awareness and to further affirm your truths. And I have found I've been able to do this just by looking at, like I said, the things that I kind of already know, but through different lenses. It just gives me another layer of understanding, just more and more layers of understanding. And so as I'm able to do that, it's almost like I'm just getting rooted even deeper in my truths. And I feel like as we do that, we will continue to make our shields to operate in this crazy world out there. Our shields are going to be just reinforced that much more as we reinforce our understanding. So I hope this has been interesting for you. I hope that you have enjoyed it, and I just thank you so much for coming along today. I hope that you have a beautiful day, and I'll see you again very soon.